The Covid-19 PCR test price has been reduced to no more than 500 rands with immediate effect. The decision comes after the Competition Commission and two private laboratories came to an agreement to lower the price. Commissioner Thembinkosi Bonagele says the PCR test price should have been reduced a long time ago.
The price initially, at the beginning of COVID-19, the price was around 1.4, 1.5. The minister granted a block exemption which would allow the industry to discuss prices with the Minister of Health. And that discussion led to the reduction of price from around about 1.4 to 850, which was a real reduction and benefit at the time. But what has since happened is that the price of technology has continued to go down and the volumes have continued to increase. The two factors which should have led to the prices getting adjusted downwards, that never occurred. So it doesn't mean that 850, when it started, it was a bad offering. It was indeed a reduction from 1.4 and a gain to the public. But those prices should have been adjusted over the last 2 years, and they were not.
It's certainly good news for consumers, but is it affordable? That's a question, especially under the current economic climate. And what impact will this have on both the consumer and the affected laboratories? Here to talk to us about this, joined now by attorney specializing in consumer law, Trudy Broekman, and economic analyst, Professor Bonke Dumisa. Good evening, and thank you very much for your time joining us tonight here on In Focus. Prof, let's begin with you. I want to say at some point, yes, I agree with the Commissioner. These prices should have dropped a long time ago. It just worries me that it has taken this while when we are in a disaster situation. There's a pandemic, but it seems profits were here prioritized in a sense. Am I correct in that analysis?
You are actually correct. The issue of profits over lives was very paramount in the top private laboratories, keeping the price of the PCR test at 850. For some of your consumers, some of your listeners or viewers who may not know the importance of the PCR test, if you are going outside the borders of South Africa, you need to have a PCR COVID test, not an antigen one. The antigen test is the one which they give you the results within 15 minutes, and there you go. It costs between 300 rands and 350 rands if you go to some retailers, and we've got many other places where they put on tents there and people do those things. But you cannot use that when you're going outside the country. Outside South Africa, they expect you to have a PCR test. And if you don't have that thing, they'll send you back into the country. So this was a real milestone. I'm not saying this is at the best price as it is now, but what Commissioner Bonagele was saying is that as more and more people have to do these tests, then you've got what is called the economies of scale in pushing down the cost per person who is serviced. And personally, I'm comfortable that this 500 rands per person tested for a PCR test is really a lot. You take a family of 3, they would save over 1,000 rands per trip, and it's worthwhile considering that we are still trying to accumulate the advantages and the benefits of mass scale testing.
Yeah. Trudy, I mean, what does the law say in an instant like this? You know, when we are talking a state of national disaster, normal laws that apply don't apply because you've got a pandemic that is really eating up the whole world and eating up the country, and particularly more severe and detrimental to the poor. I mean, are companies supposed to be profiting from such a disaster where people really don't have a choice, but they've got to take the test?
Not necessarily.
Sorry, Prof. I just wanted Trudy to come in there.
Thabo, I would say, well, there's not a particular piece of legislation that governs that very aspect at the moment, but of course government is entitled to make legislation to limit the profit taking or profit making, especially where that's excessive in an emergency situation like we're facing with this pandemic. But what I do want to say is that what we see is that when our industry bodies and our government bodies work together in this manner, we saw the Council for Medical Schemes reporting complaint to the Competition Commission, which really is one of our best functioning government bodies. Then we see a triumph for consumers. So yes, maybe one could write a law that says that excessive profit taking is not allowed in a time like this, but actually our Competition Commission, which is in place and which is functioning well and smoothly, has achieved that for consumers already. And I want to praise both of those bodies and say if we can work together more between industry bodies and government bodies in this manner, then these types of results are achieved.
Yeah. In an instance where, for example, as the Prof mentions, Trudy, that a PCR test really is what you really do need to take. There aren't any other options out there. You know, with medication, sometimes you can rely on generics, which eventually are out of copyright, and therefore they're a little bit cheaper. At this particular point, this is all you have. What rights do consumers really have here?
One of our strongest rights as consumers is to vote with our feet. And what's happened here is that we've had a settlement agreement between two of the big laboratories, Lancet and Ampath, and the Competition Commission. But the other laboratories aren't part of that deal, and they are still going to charge $850 if we as consumers do not vote with our feet. So we need to go for those cheaper tests and ensure that our medical aids do the same thing so that the price comes down for amongst all of the laboratories. So that is one of our really strong consumer rights. We do have various rights in terms of legislation as well. The Consumer Protection Act says that we are entitled to pay a fair, reasonable and just price for consumer goods and services, and that would certainly apply to PCR tests, and we think that should apply to all of the tests for COVID-19.
And Prof, then let's talk about, I mean, you've already mentioned it a little bit, factors that lead to price drops in the economy, and are we likely to see this particular one dropping even further?
Yes, I actually believe that the price will go down even further. And as Trudy correctly stated it, we as the consumers must vote with our feet. When my family when we found ourselves being stuck at the border gates because of the PCR tests, we moved back into the country and we looked around for a service provider who was going to give us those things at less than 850. We did get a service provider in Durban, which actually gave us those at 650 each. So you can see then that when people vote with their feet, they can be able to pressurize, because those two top laboratories are actually the price setters in the market. So if ever the other laboratories try to resist those prices, they'll be out of the market.
Yeah. And as far as the state of the economy right now and what people can afford and what we know is the situation as far as the employment of people is concerned, is really a price being put on these tests really justifiable?
So can I possibly come in at this stage and just say that our consumers in South Africa, many of them, sorry, Professor, are embattled in the tough economic situation that we're facing as a result of the lockdowns pursuant to the pandemic. And that any steps that can reduce the prices and the pressure on consumers at this time are to be pursued and to be praised.
All right, Prof, you wanted to weigh in quick one there?
Yeah, no. Truly said what I wanted to say. The price, we cannot really force it further than 500 for now. Let the market absorb it, and then let's see how it reacts to it. And then I am sure the price will go down further, because we must also be considerate that businesses And yes, they are there in business to make money, but they cannot make money if ever there are no consumers. By the same time, we as consumers must allow the businesses to make a little bit of profit to survive.
I appreciate you both for coming on. Thank you very much. That's Trudy as well as Professor Bonke Dumisa. I appreciate your time.